Can you trust God even when you don't understand what He's doing? And I don't mean, can you trust that eventually God will come around to doing what you want Him to do, but can you trust Him to do what is right even when everything seems to be falling apart? Can you trust God when your life is filled with difficulty, but when you look around and the people who don't even care about God are living in comfort and it seems like everything is perfect for them? Job continues with this struggle in today's reading from Job chapters 23 to 24. The questions are the same as he's been asking all along. Why am I being treated as though I'm one of the wicked? And why do the wicked have such a smooth and easy life as if they're among the righteous? And Job shows us in these 2 chapters that the answer to those questions is not to get the answer. The answer is to trust in God's wisdom and to rest in God's goodness. Or as we've been saying throughout this series, to simply let God be God. Let's look at the second question first. Job asks in chapter 24, why doesn't God allow the godly to see Him carry out justice on the earth? And then he describes how the wicked spend their lives doing everything that God hates. They take advantage of widows. They oppress orphans. They ignore the needs of the poor. They steal and they kill to get whatever they want. They rebel against God. They have no interest in knowing God's ways. And they think that God doesn't see what they're doing. And Job wants to know why God doesn't do anything about it. He doesn't understand. But even though he questions the timing and the ways of God's justice, he does know for certain that God is just. And in the end, even though it doesn't make sense to Job in the present time, even though it seems like the wicked get away with everything, Job surrenders and he trusts that God will ultimately deal with them and do what is right and just. Verse 24, he says, the wicked are exalted only for a little while, and then they're gone. The prosperity and the rebellion won't last forever. They will be brought low, he says. They will be cut off. And even though it seems like wrong so often prevails over right in this world, Job surrenders and he clings to his trust that God will show Himself to be God in His time and in His way. And he trusts that the same will be true in his own life and in the lives of everyone who loves God and who walks in God's ways. The second half of chapter 23, Job is struggling. He says, I've walked in God's ways. I've obeyed His word, so it makes no sense why He's doing this to me. And Job's tired of having theological arguments with his friends. He wants to talk to God Himself. Because Job is convinced if he could just get before God and make his argument before Him, if he could just lay out all the evidence of his life before the Lord, then he is convinced that God, who is just, would release Job from this judgment that he doesn't deserve. But Job can't talk to God because he doesn't know where God can be found. He doesn't know what God is up to. So what do you do when you don't know what God's doing and when you don't know why He's doing it? You trust what you do know about God's wisdom and about God's heart. Job says in verse 8, I go forward, but God's not there. I go backward, but I can't find Him. When He moves to the left, I don't see Him there. When He moves to the right, I don't see Him there either. But then here's the key statement in verse 10. It's a beautiful statement of trust. Job says, I don't know where God is going, but He knows the way that I go. And not only does He know the way that I go, but Job is confident that God is purposefully guiding and working in his going. And he's confident, therefore, that his suffering is not for no reason at all. He says, when God has finished testing me, I will come forth like pure gold. It's an Old Testament version of a wonderful New Testament promise that we see in Romans chapter 8, where Paul's talking to believers who are experiencing the pain of living in this world. And he assures them in verse 28 that God will take everything, including the most painful parts, and that He will work it out for good for those who love Him, for those who are called according to His purpose. And what is His purpose? Verse 29, he says, God's plan for us from the beginning of time is that we would come out like pure gold. In other words, that we would be conformed into the image of Jesus. So even though it seems so often in this world and in our lives that wrong prevails over right, even though it's often so confusing and we don't have any idea what God's up to, we can, along with Job and along with Paul, cling to what we do know about God's heart. And we can simply trust God to be God and to work out His perfect and loving plan in and through our lives, in His time and in His way.